A trail of crimson droplets glistened in the morning dew, leading Siiya beyond her village's protective boundaries. Her people's elders had warned against venturing alone, especially to aid strangers. Yet something pulled her forward until she found him, an Apache hunter from a rival tribe, arrow piercing his shoulder, life ebbing with each labored breath. Their eyes met, his filled with pain and defiance, hers with compassion that transcended generations of conflict. With trembling hands, she reached toward the wound, knowing this moment would forever alter two lives, two tribes, two destinies intertwined by fate's unexpected design. This stranger's blood now stained her fingers, binding them in ways neither could imagine. Would healing this enemy bring destruction to everything she held dear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern mountains when Siiya slipped from her family's dwelling. Her small medicine pouch, worn smooth from her grandmother's decades of use before passing it to her, hung securely at her waist. Within it rested the sacred herbs, sage for cleansing, yarrow for wounds, willow bark for pain. Each plant carried not just healing properties, but stories, wisdom passed through generations of her people's healers. The plants speak if you listen. Her grandmother had taught her, guiding her small hands over bristled leaves and tender stems. They offer themselves to heal, but only if you approach with respect. Siiya's fingers traced the intricate beadwork of the pouch, each stitch a testament to her lineage, her responsibility. At 20 summers, she was not yet the tribe's healer, but more than a mere apprentice. The older women watched her with mingled pride and concern, her skill undeniable, her willingness to question tradition troubling. The dying village stirred to life around her. Women tended morning fires, children helped with chores, men prepared for hunting or council meetings. From the central gathering space came the low rhythmic voices of elders discussing matters of importance: water access, grazing lands, and increasingly, Apache movements along their eastern borders. They push further into our hunting grounds each season, she had overheard her father saying the previous night. The tracks of their warriors grow bolder, closer. Her father, Hastin, respected for both wisdom and strength, had spent more time in council these past moons than in all seasons prior. Lines etched deeper around his eyes with each passing day. The burden of leadership weighed heavily, particularly as drought made resources scarcer and tensions with neighboring tribes heightened. Siiya slipped beyond the village's outer dwellings, nodding respectfully to Two Rivers, the eldest woman, who always rose before others to greet the sun. "Early wanderings again, daughter?" Two Rivers called, her voice carrying the crackle of age, but missing nothing in sharpness. "Gathering morning dew for grandmother's remedies," Siiya replied, lifting her water skin in explanation. "The sunrise blessing makes it potent." Two Rivers nodded, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "Stay within sight of the smoke." The Apache had been sighted near the Silver Creek. Siiya lowered her gaze in acknowledgement, but inside, familiar frustration kindled. Always the warnings, always the boundaries. The world beyond their settlement called to her with voices just as compelling as the plants she tended. How could she learn all the Creator offered if confined to safe paths and familiar territories? She followed the gentle slope toward the valley where sage grew in abundance. Morning light filtered through juniper and pine, casting dappled shadows across the earth. Birdsong punctuated the stillness, a world awakening. This was her true home, among growing things, away from the confinement of the village. The distinctive red earth of their territory gave way to lighter soil as she descended. Here, moisture lingered longer, nurturing different medicines than those on the higher ground. Siiya knelt, running her fingers through cool grass, feeling the morning dew dampen her skin. She closed her eyes, centering herself before harvesting, offering silent gratitude for what would be taken. When she opened them again, something caught her attention, a disruption in the perfect beating of dew. A single crimson droplet, stark, against green stems. Blood. Her healer's instincts quickened. Someone or something wounded had passed this way recently. Another droplet glistened several paces ahead, then another. A trail leading toward the Silver Creek, precisely where she had been warned not to go. Siiya hesitated, duty warring with curiosity. If someone from her village was injured, they would have returned for help. This blood likely belonged to an animal or a stranger. The tribal boundaries were clear. Aid your own, avoid others, especially Apache God, yet the blood called to her, fresh, not yet darkened by extended exposure to air. Someone wounded lay ahead, their need immediate. The healer's path honored no arbitrary boundaries when life hung in balance. Decision made. Siiya rose and followed the crimson trail, her medicine pouch suddenly heavy with responsibility. With each step away from the safety of her village, warnings echoed in her mind. Yet something stronger pulled her forward, a certainty that this moment mattered beyond tribal divisions and ancient enmities. The blood droplets grew larger, closer, together as she approached the Silver Creek's edge. Then she saw him. He lay half-submerged in shadow beneath a gnarled juniper, one leg extended into a shaft of morning light. An Apache warrior, his distinctive leather garments and hairstyle, leaving no doubt. Muscular frame now tense with pain, face drawn, skin sheened with sweat despite the morning chill. Blood had soaked through his shoulder wrapping, the broken shaft of an arrow protruding at an angle that spoke of a struggle to remove it. Beside him lay a bow of remarkable craftsmanship and a knife with a handle of polished bone. When the warrior sensed her presence, his eyes snapped open, dark, intense, and immediately alert despite his weakened state. His right hand moved instinctively toward the knife. Siiya raised her empty palms, the universal gesture of peace. "I mean no harm," she said in her own tongue, then attempted the few Apache words she had learned from traders. The warrior's expression remained guarded, but his hands stilled. Pain flickered across his features as he tried to shift position. The movement caused fresh blood to seep around the arrow shaft. Siiya gestured toward her medicine pouch, then to his wound. Understanding crossed his face, followed by conflict, the same weighing of tribal boundaries against immediate need that she herself had just navigated. After a long moment, he inclined his head slightly. She approached cautiously, kneeling beyond. Arm's reach, the broken arrow told its own story. The shaft was not of dying make, neither the wood nor the distinctive fletching matched her people's craftsmanship. Nor did it appear to be Apache work. A third party had fired this arrow. "The shaft must come out," she said, using gestures to supplement her words. The warrior nodded, jaw tight. "Galoda," he said, pressing a hand to his chest. His name. "A peace. Offering of sorts." "Siiya," she responded, touching her own heart. She examined the wound without touching it first. The arrow had entered the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing bone by mere finger-widths. A fortunate strike, if one could call any arrow fortunate. The attempt to remove it had only embedded it more firmly, the barbed tip now caught in muscle. Infection had begun, the skin around the entry point swollen and unnaturally warm. Galoda watched her assessment with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Though weakened by blood loss and fever, alertness remained. A dangerous man, even wounded. The scar across his forearm, and another visible at his collarbone, spoke of previous battles survived. "You were ambushed?" Siiya asked, miming a surprise attack. Galoda nodded, then held up 3 fingers. "3 attackers," she translated aloud. He pointed to the arrow, then east, then made a circular motion with his finger, before pointing to himself. She frowned, concentrating. "They circled around to reach you from the east?" Another nod, followed by a grimace of pain. The wound needed immediate attention. The herbal poultice she carried would help with infection, but she needed water to clean the wound properly, and more substantial tools to remove the arrow safely. "I will help," she said, "but first, water." She mimed drinking, then cleaning. Glistened pointed toward the creek with his good arm. Siiya hesitated. Leaving him meant trusting he wouldn't attack when she returned. Staying meant treating him inadequately. Trust, like healing, required a first step. She rose slowly. "I will return," she said, pointing to herself, then the creek, and back to him. His dark eyes held hers for a long moment before he nodded once. Understanding passed between them, an agreement. She would help him live. He would not make her regret it. As Siiya moved toward the creek, the gravity of her choice settled upon her shoulders. She was violating her tribe's most stringent warnings by aiding an Apache warrior. If discovered, the consequences would be severe. Yet something about this man, about this moment, felt aligned with a deeper purpose, one that transcended this artificial boundaries of tribal conflict. The broken arrow beside him had come from neither of their peoples. Someone else had tried to kill this hunter, perhaps someone who benefited from keeping their tribes in conflict. She knelt at the creek's edge, watching the water's silver passage over smooth stones. Like the creek itself, she had committed to a course now. There would be no turning back. Siiya returned carrying her grandmother's sacred clay bowl filled with creek water. The bowl, passed through 5 generations of healers, bore simple yet powerful symbols etched around its rim, representations of the 4 sacred directions and the healing spirits that resided in each. Water carried in this vessel was believed to absorb the bowl's blessing, becoming more than mere liquid. Glistened watched her approach, his breathing more labored than before. Fever brightened his eyes unnaturally. Time was working against them. She knelt beside him and set the bowl down carefully. From her medicine pouch, she withdrew small packets wrapped in soft hide, each containing different healing elements. First came the yarrow, crushed to release its properties. Next, juniper berries, known to fight the fire of infection. Finally, a rare powder of fungus that grew only on lightning-struck trees, powerful against the deepest infections. As she prepared the medicine, she spoke softly, explaining each step as her grandmother had taught her. Though Glistened likely understood little of her words, the cadence seemed to steady him. His eyes never left her hands. "The arrow must come out first," she said, gesturing to make her meaning clear. He nodded, then surprisingly spoke several words. In her language, "I know pain. Do what must." Her surprise must have shown, for a ghost of a smile touched his lips before pain chased it away. "You speak, dying?" she asked. Small words. "Trading words," he replied haltingly. This changed matters. Communication, even limited, would make the healing process easier. It also made him more dangerous. An Apache who understood her people's tongue had obvious advantages in conflict. "Bite this," she instructed, offering a folded strip of leather. From her pouch, arrow barbed, will tear coming out. Glistened accepted the leather, placing it between his teeth. With surprising composure, he positioned himself, bracing his good arm against the ground. Siiya poured water from the sacred bowl over her hands, then moistened the area around the wound. The dried blood softened, revealing angry, inflamed skin. Beneath, she probed gently with her fingers, confirming what she had suspected. The arrowhead had a backward-facing barb that would catch on flesh if pulled directly out. "I must push through, then break the head," she explained, demonstrating with her hands. More pain, but less damage. His eyes registered understanding, followed by steely resolve. He nodded once. Siiya took a deep breath, centering herself as she had been taught. Healing required more than knowledge. It demanded presence, connection to the one suffering. She placed one hand firmly on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. With the other, she grasped the arrow shaft. "On 3 breaths," she said. 1. Galota inhaled deeply through his nose. 2. His body tensed, preparing. 3. In one swift motion, she pushed the arrow forward and through, creating a new exit wound at the back of his shoulder. Gailota's entire body went rigid, a muffled groan escaping despite the leather between his teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he remained conscious. His eyes fixed on some distant point dot working quickly, Siiya broke off the arrowhead where it protruded from his back, then pulled the shaft out through the original entry wound. Fresh blood flowed, but less than she had feared. The barbed metal head dropped to the ground beside them, its surface dark with blood and something else. Greenish residue. Poison, she said, recognizing the distinctive coloration. She had seen it before when a child from her village had been struck with a similarly treated arrow 2 seasons past. That child had not survived. Urgency sharpened her movements. She cleansed both wounds thoroughly with the sacred water, then packed them with the prepared herbal mixture. Gailota remained still throughout, his breathing carefully controlled, though small tremors betrayed the intensity of his pain god as she worked. He studied the broken arrowhead, recognition dawning in his fever-bright eyes. "Crow," he said finally, the single word heavy with meaning. "The Crow people did this to you?" she asked, binding his shoulder with strips of clean cloth from her pouch. "Not Crow people," he corrected, his voice strained. "Crow faction. Those who profit from war between Apache and Dine." The implications settled between them like a physical presence. This was no random attack on a solitary hunter. Someone wanted Gailota dead, someone who benefited from continued conflict between their tribes. As the sun climbed higher, casting dappled light through the juniper branches, Gailota's fever began to recede. The herbs were working, pulling poison and infection from his body. Though still weak from blood loss, his eyes had regained focus, the delirium giving way to clarity. Siiya sat nearby, grinding more medicine between smooth river stones. The rhythmic motion calmed her thoughts, which had been tumbling like creek water over rocks since his mention of the Crow faction. "Why would they want you dead?" she asked, looking up from her work. Gailota shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his freshly dressed wound. The motion caused a necklace previously hidden beneath his garment to slip into view, an intricate arrangement of turquoise, bone, and silver beads centered around a polished obsidian pendant carved with symbols. Siiya's hands stilled. She recognized those markings from her grandmother's teachings about neighboring tribes. This was no ordinary tribal necklace. It signified leadership, worn only by those of significant standing among the Apache. "You are a chief?" she asked, unable to keep surprise from her voice. "Son of chief," he corrected, his fingers touching the necklace briefly. "I am called Galuta, he who strikes from shadow." The name suited him. There was something quietly dangerous about him, even in his weakened state, a coiled readiness that never fully subsided. "And you?" he asked. "Your name means?" "Siiya," she replied, "she who sees far." A smile touched his lips briefly. "Good name for healer." She nodded, resuming her grinding. "My grandmother chose it when I was born with eyes open, looking at the stars." "The same grandmother who taught you healing?" "Yes," Siiya smiled at his perception. "She is tribe's healer still, though her hands grow stiff. She says I have the gift." Gailota watched her work, his dark eyes thoughtful. "You risk much, helping enemy. Are you my enemy?" she asked directly, meeting his gaze. The question hung between them, challenging generations of conflict. "I was raised to believe Dine are enemies," he said carefully, "as you were taught Apache are yours. And yet here we sit," Siiya observed, speaking instead of fighting. "Here we sit," he agreed, then added with unexpected gravity, because you followed blood trail when others would have turned away. The simple truth of this settled between them. Choice had brought them here, her choice to help, his choice to trust. Each decision, a small rebellion against the boundaries that separated their peoples. Gaelota shifted again, reaching slowly into a small pouch at his waist. Siiya tensed momentarily, but remained still, trusting the connection forming between them. He withdrew a small bundle of dried leaves. "For fever," he said, offering them to her. "My people use." Siiya accepted the offering, recognizing willow leaves prepared in a method slightly different from her own tribe's practice. The shared knowledge of healing plants created another bridge between them. "Your father," she began, gesturing to the necklace. "He sends his son alone into dying territory?" Gailota's expression grew serious. "Not alone originally. I separated from others to investigate tracks. Crow faction ambushed me near creek. I killed 2 before third shot arrow." "You were scouting our lands," Siiya stated, the implications clear. "Not to attack," he countered, "to understand movements. There have been raids on Apache camps blamed on dying warriors." "And raids on our settlements blamed on Apache," she replied, understanding dawning. "But you suspect Crow faction in both." He nodded grimly. "They benefit from our conflict. Trade routes through Crow territory, worth many horses if Apache and dying cannot use direct paths." The puzzle pieces aligned with disturbing clarity. A third party manipulating both tribes, stoking generations-old tensions for profit. Her father and the council had been convinced recent attacks came from Apache warriors, just as Gailota's people believed dying raiders were responsible for their losses. "I must tell my father," Siiya said, already imagining the council's reaction to her words and to how she had obtained this information. "And I must return to my people?" Gaelota replied, though both knew he was still too weak for such a journey. Their eyes met in shared understanding of the impossible position they now occupied, each possessing knowledge that could prevent bloodshed, each bound by loyalty to their tribe, and now, increasingly, to each other. The necklace gleamed in the shifting light, its significance a reminder of all that stood between them. The midday sun had passed its peak when Siiya realized how long she had been absent from the village. Concern flickered across her face as she gathered the soiled cloths used to clean Gailota's wound. "Your people will search for you," he observed, reading her expression. "Yes," she acknowledged. "I told an elder I was gathering herbs, but I've been gone too long." She hesitated, torn between duty to her village and the wounded man before her. "You need more medicine, food, water." Gaelota gestured to his hunting pouch. "I have dried meat. The creek provides water." His voice carried strength he likely didn't feel. Pride keeping weakness at bay. Ciy assessed him with a healer's objective. The fever had diminished, but infection could return swiftly. The wound needed regular cleaning, fresh poultices. Leaving him alone risked his recovery, perhaps his life. "I will return tonight," she decided, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice, "with more supplies." Suspicion briefly shadowed his features. Why risk more for Apache? Her answer came without thought. "I am healer first, dying second." Something shifted in his expression, respect, perhaps understanding. He nodded once, accepting her decision without further question. Siiya arranged what supplies she could leave water in a small skin. Herbs for pain if fever returned, the last of her clean bandages. As she worked, her woven bracelet caught the light, a band of blue, white, and black threads her mother had made for her coming-of-age ceremony. Protection symbols were woven into its pattern, designed to shield the wearer from harm. After a moment's hesitation, she untied it from her wrist. "Take this," she said, offering the bracelet, "for protection while I'm gone." Gaelota looked from the bracelet to her face, recognizing the significance of such a gift. "This is sacred to you." "It will be returned when I come back," she replied. Simply, he accepted the offering with solemn reverence, tying it around his own wrist with his teeth in one hand. The bracelet made for her smaller wrist fit snugly against his skin. "I will guard it with my life," he said, the formal words, carrying the weight of a vow. With reluctance that surprised her, Siiya prepared to leave. She instructed him to remain hidden, to move only if absolutely necessary. Then, gathering her empty medicine pouch and water vessels, she retraced her steps toward the village, committing the location to memory that the journey back felt longer. Her thoughts divided between what lay behind and what awaited ahead. She would need a convincing explanation for her extended absence and a plan to return undetected after nightfall. More challenging still would be keeping knowledge of Gelota from her grandmother, whose perceptive eyes missed little Dot as the village came into view. Siiya spotted unusual activity warriors gathered at the central fire, her father among them. Their stance and expressions spoke of urgent matters. Her heart quickened. Had they somehow discovered her secret? 2 rivers intercepted her before she reached the gathering. "Your father has been asking for you," the elder woman said, her sharp eyes noting Siiya's disheveled appearance and empty gathering basket. "The council meets about Apache sightings near the eastern ridge." "I lost track of time," Siiya explained, the half-truth bitter on her tone. "The yarrow was particularly abundant this morning." 2 Rivers' expression remained skeptical, but she merely gestured toward Siiya's dwelling. "Clean yourself before joining them. There is blood on your dress." Siiya looked down, dismayed to find small dark stains on her garment, evidence of her morning's activities. "From a rabbit," she lied, the words feeling like stones in her mouth, caught in a bramble. The elder woman held her gaze a moment longer than comfortable before nodding. "Hurry then. They wait." In her family's dwelling, Siiya quickly changed garments and washed Gelota's blood from her hands. As she did, the absence of her bracelet felt conspicuous, its protection now guarding another. She had never been without it since her mother had tied it around her wrist 3 summers ago. "Daughter." Her father's voice came from the entrance. Hastian's tall frame filled the doorway, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "You were gone long this morning." "The plants called me further than expected," she replied, focusing on arranging her medicine implements to avoid meeting. His gaze directly. "We ride at dawn," he said, his tone heavy with authority. "Apache warriors have been sighted. The council has decided." Siiya's hand stilled. "Ride where?" "To defend our boundaries," came the solemn answer. "They must be shown. We will not tolerate further incursion." Her father's words fell like stones into still water, ripples of consequence spreading outward. Dawn would bring Gain warriors riding toward conflict, perhaps toward Gelota's people, while she planned to slip away in darkness to aid the enemies. Sun. Alone by the Silver Creek, Gelota measured time by the sun's gradual westward journey. Each shift of light through the juniper branches marked passing moments of vulnerability he could ill afford. A warrior immobilized was a warrior at risk. He tested his injured shoulder, gauging strength against pain. The dying girl's medicine had worked better than expected. Though movement sent fire through his muscles, the throbbing heat of infection had subsided, and clarity had returned to his thoughts. Her skill rivaled the Apache healers he had known, perhaps even surpassed some .Ciya. She who sees far. The name suited her. Those dark, intelligent eyes had seemed to look beyond his Apache garments, beyond tribal divisions, seeing him simply as a man in need. Such vision was rare in these times of deepening conflict. His fingers found the woven bracelet around his wrist, tracing its intricate pattern. A sacred item freely given to an enemy. The gesture violated every boundary between their peoples, yet she had offered it without hesitation. The weight of her trust settled uncomfortably on his shoulders, heavier somehow than his responsibilities as the chief's son Dot to distract himself from both pain and troubled thoughts. Gilota reached for his hunting knife and a small piece of juniper wood that had fallen nearby. Carving had always steadied his hands and mind, a practice taught by his grandfather in childhood. Even one-handed, the familiar motion of blade against wood brought focus. The wood seemed to contain its own spirit, revealing its shape as he worked. A wolf began to emerge, guardian spirit of his mother's family line. His thoughts drifted to his father, who would now be organizing search parties, perhaps already believing his son dead. Nako, the wise one, had counseled against this scouting mission, arguing that Gilota was too valuable to risk. You speak of peace with the dying while preparing me for leadership in war. Gilota had challenged his father before departing. How can I lead toward peace if I do not understand our supposed enemy? His father's response came back to him now. Understanding and exposure are different paths, my son. One brings wisdom, the other brings vulnerability. The irony of his current situation, wounded, dependent on a dying healer, would not be lost on his father. Vulnerability had indeed found him, though perhaps wisdom might yet follow Dot as he carved. Gilota reflected on what Siiya had revealed. Without words, her willingness to aid him spoke of compassion that transcended tribal boundaries. Her skills showed years of dedicated learning. Her questions demonstrated intelligence and political awareness unusual in one so young. Most significant was her immediate understanding of the Crow faction's manipulation. She had grasped the implications as quickly as any Apache council member would have. Such a mind in such a woman. Had she been Apache, songs would already be composed about her. The carved wolf took clearer shape beneath his blade. Though simple, it captured the essence of the animal alertness, strength, loyalty. Qualities he had glimpsed in Siiya during their brief acquaintance. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the creek bed. Would she truly return as promised? The rational part of him argued against such hope. She had done more than duty required already. Returning would only increase her risk. Yet the bracelet around his wrist suggested she intended to keep her word. A rustling sound from the nearby brush instantly shifted his awareness. The knife in his hand became a weapon, rather than a carving tool. His body tensed, ignoring the flare of pain from his shoulder. 3 possibilities existed. Siiya returning earlier than expected, an animal passing through, or a threat. Years of warrior training inclined him toward the third option. With practiced silence, Gilota shifted into a defensive position behind the juniper trunk, his good arm ready with the knife. If Crow faction scouts had returned to confirm his death, they would find their task unfinished. Wounded or not, he would ensure at least one accompanied him to the spirit world. The rustling grew closer, deliberate rather than the random movements of wildlife. A human approach, then. His grip tightened on the knife handle. The partially carved wolf tucked safely in his belt pouch. A shadow moved between trees at the edge of the small clearing. Gilota held his breath, muscles coiled for either defense or attack as the figure emerged into view. Though far from his full strength, he now moved with growing confidence. The wound sealed beneath Siiya's careful bandaging. Your medicine works quickly, he observed as they paused by a small stream to refill their water skins. Apache healers would be impressed. The body knows how to heal itself, Siiya replied, kneeling to check his bandages. Medicine merely creates the conditions for that knowledge to express itself. She unwrapped the dressing, revealing the wound still angry and red, but clean, the edges already forming new skin. Her fingers gently probed the area, assessing healing progress with practiced precision. The poison is gone from your blood, she concluded. The pain when you move? Manageable, he replied, though she noted the tightness around his eyes that suggested otherwise. Manageable means present, she corrected with a healer's authority that transcended their cultural differences. Do not push beyond what your body can bear. Even the strongest warrior must respect healing's pace. A smile ghosted across his face. You would make my father's war chief nervous, speaking so directly. Truth doesn't require soft wrapping, she said, applying fresh medicine to his shoulder. My grandmother taught me that healing sometimes demands uncomfortable honesty. As she worked, Galuda studied her technique with evident interest. Your poultice, it contains juniper and sage. But what is the third element? It smells like mountain. Snow. Good nose, she acknowledged, impressed by his observation. Glacier lily, found only near the highest springs. It draws infection outward. Their exchange of knowledge continued as they traveled Siiya, explaining plant properties, Galuda sharing tracking insights. He showed her how to identify boot prints left by crow warriors, distinct from the moccasins both their peoples favored. She demonstrated how certain broken stems revealed not just passage, but the time elapsed since disturbance. When they reached a particularly dense thicket, Galuda paused, signaling silence with a raised hand. His head tilted, listening to something beyond Siiya's awareness. Without explanation, he grasped her arm and pulled her down behind a fallen log, his body positioned protectively between her and whatever he had sensed. Moments later, voices became audible, men speaking down, their tones serious, purposeful. A search party from her village. 3 warriors, Galuda whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Moving east. Siiya recognized the voices, her cousin among them. They were close enough that standing would reveal her position. Close enough that normal conversation would carry to their ears. Discovery with an Apache warrior would leave little opportunity for explanation. They remained motionless, barely breathing as the search party passed within 20 paces of their hiding place. One warrior paused, scanning the area carefully, his experienced eyes searching for signs of disturbance. Siiya's heart hammered so loudly she feared it might betray their position. Galuda's hand found hers in their forced stillness, a reassuring pressure. The gesture startled her, intimate in its casualness, as if offering comfort to her, were natural despite their people's enmity. More surprising was her own response, immediate relaxation at his touch, trust overriding generations of taught suspicion. The moment stretched until finally the searching warrior rejoined his companions, their voices gradually fading as they continued eastward. That was close, Siiya breathed, suddenly aware of their proximity, his chest against her back, his arms still partially around her from their hurried concealment. Galuda withdrew slightly, giving her space, though his eyes remained alert to their surroundings. They search for you? Likely, she admitted. I've been gone since yesterday. My grandmother would have noticed by now. We should move quickly then, he said, rising cautiously to scan the forest. The crow camp cannot be far based on these tracks. As Siiya stood, she noticed Galuda wince, a brief flash of pain he tried to conceal. The sudden exertion of pulling her to safety had strained his healing wound. Without comment, she reached into her medicine pouch and handed him willow bark to chew. He accepted it with a nod of understanding, another small moment of trust between them. No explanation needed, no pride requiring protection. They continued their tracking, moving deeper into disputed territory, land claimed by both tribes, yet rarely patrolled by either due to the risk of confrontation. The perfect hunting ground for those who would manipulate from the shadows. There, Galuda said suddenly, pointing to a broken branch displaying a distinctive cut pattern. Black feather marker. We're close to their territory now. Following the black feather markers led them up a steep, rocky incline rarely traveled by either tribe. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, narrow ledges overlooking sharp drops, loose shale that shifted treacherously underfoot. Twice Galuda steadied Siiya with his good arm. When her footing faltered, his reflexes quick despite his injury. Few would choose this path, he observed, scanning the difficult landscape ahead. making it perfect for those with secrets to keep. Siiya replied dot as they rounded a jagged outcropping. Galota suddenly halted, pulling Siiya behind the rocks. Below, a small valley opened, and within it, the unmistakable signs of a temporary camp, recently abandoned fire pits, trampled grass, discarded bones from recent meals. Black feather band, he confirmed, noting distinctive stake patterns where shelters had stood. But they've moved on, recently. Siiya surveyed the site. Heading where? North, Galota determined, indicating disturbed ground. Toward the boundary, where our tribes will meet. His expression darkened. They moved to watch the conflict they've created. The knowledge added urgency to their mission. Whatever evidence they hoped to find needed to be discovered quickly and conveyed to both tribal leaders before blood was shed. We should search there. Camp, Siiya suggested. Something may have been left behind. They descended carefully, alert for any signs of remaining scouts. The abandoned camp yielded little at first glance. Black Feather Band had been thorough in their departure. But as Galota investigated the central fire pit, he uncovered a small leather pouch buried beneath ash. Inside lay several arrowheads identical to the one removed from his shoulder, each bearing the distinctive craftsman mark. More damning were small wooden tokens carved with crude representations of both Apache and Dine symbols tools for leaving false evidence at raid sites. This proves their deception, Siiya said, examining the tokens. But will it be enough to convince warriors? Already prepared for battle? Before Galota could respond, distant voices echoed across the valley approaching from the north. Black Feather Scouts returning to retrieve what had been hidden, or to ensure nothing incriminating remained. We need to move, he urged, securing the evidence in his pouch dot, with the Crow faction approaching from the north, and Siiya's village search parties likely still combing the eastern forests. Their options were limited. Galota pointed west, toward a sheer rock face. There, he decided, until they pass. They crossed the abandoned camp quickly, staying low. As they neared the western cliff, Siiya noticed what appeared to be a shadow among the rocks, a narrow opening partially concealed by overgrown brush. She touched Galota's arm, directing his attention to the potential shelter. The opening, barely wide enough for an adult to slip through sideways, led to a cave extending deep into the mountain. Cool, dry air greeted them as they entered, along with the musty scent of a space long undisturbed. Shafts of light penetrated from small fissures in the ceiling, providing enough illumination to reveal the cave's first chamber. Both stopped in astonishment at what the light revealed. The cave walls were covered with ancient paintings, handprints, animal forms, and human figures rendered in ochre, white, and black pigments. But most remarkable were the scenes depicted ceremonies showing figures clearly identifiable as both Apache and Dine, standing together, sharing food, participating in joint hunts. The old stories, Galota breathed, moving closer to the images, of when our peoples were allied. Siiya recognized symbols her grandmother had shown her sacred markings, now used only in their most important healing ceremonies, here displayed alongside Apache spiritual symbols in a single unified ritual. This cave must date back to the time before the division, she said, her voice hushed with reverence. 7 generations at least. They moved deeper into the chamber, discovering more elaborate paintings showing a great council of both peoples. At the center stood 2 figures, one bearing the distinct headdress of an Apache leader, the other wearing ceremonial robes unmistakably Dine, their hands clasped in friendship or alliance. Our peoples didn't just trade, Siiya realized. They governed together. Galota traced the ancient images with careful fingers. My grandfather spoke of such councils, but few believed his stories. The hatred between our tribes has become too comfortable, too much a part of who we believe ourselves to be. A particularly detailed panel showed both peoples defending their shared Territory against a third tribe warriors, standing shoulder to shoulder against a common threat, protecting their unified communities. The parallel to their current situation was unmistakable. History repeating itself across generations division, engineered by outside forces, cooperation forgotten in favor of manufactured hatred. This cave is more than shelter, Siiya said, her voice gaining strength with conviction. It's the evidence we need, not just of Blackfeather's deception, but of what could be again. Outside, voices grew closer as Crow Scouts reached the abandoned campsite. Inside, illuminated by ancient paintings, Siiya and Gailota discovered something, perhaps more valuable than the evidence they had sought, a vision of possibility, a shared past that suggested a potential shared future. They remained in the cave until the Crow Scouts departed, using the time to study the ancient paintings and gather their thoughts. The discovery had shifted something fundamental between them. Their alliance no longer felt unprecedented, but rather like a return to something natural, a remembering rather than a creation. As afternoon light angled through the cave's fissures, Siiya reluctantly broke their contemplative silence. I must return to my village soon. The harvest blessing ceremony begins at sunset. My absence would be too conspicuous. Gailota nodded, understanding the dilemma. We have evidence now, but delivering it remains difficult. Neither of us can approach the other's tribe without risk, and separate journeys to our own peoples might mean the knowledge arrives too late. Siiya traced the outline of the unified council depicted on the cave wall. We need more time and a way to coordinate our actions once apart. She reached for her medicine pouch, retrieving a hawk feather she used for applying delicate poultices. Perhaps we can create what we need, using pigments scraped carefully from the cave floor, the same ochre and charcoal. The ancient artists had used Siiya, demonstrated how her people marked feathers to convey messages between hunting parties. Simple symbols indicated direction, danger, opportunity, or the need to return. Our system is similar, Gailota said, showing how Apache scouts modified the pattern to include more specific information about time and numbers. Taking the feather, he added notches along its spine with his knife, creating a more complex communication tool. Working together, they developed a hybrid system, combining elements from both traditions to create something new yet anchored in their shared past. With careful precision, they prepared 3 feathers, each marked with specific patterns. This one, Siiya explained, holding up the first feather with 3 notches and a red tip, means danger approaches retreat to the cave. This one, Gailota continued, displaying a feather with crossed lines at its base, indicates it is time to bring the evidence to both tribes that an opportunity has presented itself. The third feather, marked with both their tribal symbols, connected by a spiral line, carried the most significant message: success, evidence delivered, understanding achieved. We will need places to leave these where only we will find them, Siiya said, thinking practically. Gailota considered this. The lightning-struck oak at the forest edge. The hollow beneath its roots is known to few. And the split rock by the Silver Creek crossing, she added. My people believe it harbors spirits, so most avoid it. With locations established, they finalized their plan. Siiya would return for the ceremony, gathering what information she could about her father's war party while seeking an opportunity to share their discoveries. Gailota would approach his people cautiously, assessing the situation before revealing. Himself, the cave would serve as their sanctuary and meeting place should communication become impossible. 3 days was their limit. If neither had succeeded by then, they would reconvene to attempt a more direct approach, regardless of personal risk. As they prepared to part ways, an unspoken tension grew between them. What had begun as an act of compassion toward an enemy had transformed into something neither had words to define: trust that defied generations of division, understanding that transcended cultural boundaries, and something more, something neither dared acknowledge. Directly. Take this, Gelota said, removing a small amulet from around his neck, a polished stone wrapped in sinew and adorned with a single eagle feather. It grants protection to those on difficult journeys. Siiya accepted the gift, recognizing its spiritual significance to his people. In return, she removed a small leather pouch from her neck containing sacred pollen. For clear vision when paths grow confused, she explained, placing it in his palm. Their fingers touched during the exchange, lingering longer than necessity required. In the dim cave light, their eyes met with an intensity that communicated what neither yet had words to express. 3 days, Siiya said finally, securing his amulet around her neck. 3 days, he echoed, carefully attaching her medicine pouch to his belt. They emerged from the cave separately, Siiya first, heading southeast toward her village, Gelota following after sufficient time had passed, moving northeast to intercept his people's hunting party. Between them, the message feathers represented their fragile plan to prevent bloodshed and perhaps restore an ancient alliance long forgotten. Neither looked back as they parted, yet both carried the weight of the others' safety alongside their own. Their separate journeys now bound by shared purpose, shared knowledge, and something deeper taking root between them, something that, like the cave paintings, suggested possibilities beyond the constraints of their present understanding. Siiya returned to find her village transformed. Where the central gathering space typically hosted cooking fires and children at play, now stood grim-faced warriors, preparing weapons. Women worked methodically, packing journey food and medicine bundles. The atmosphere hung heavy with purpose, an unspoken fear the community, bracing for conflict's inevitable cost. Most ominous was the presence of the tribal war drum positioned at the center of activity, crafted generations ago from a lightning-struck cedar and covered with elk hide treated through sacred ceremonies. The drum emerged only when blood would soon be shed. Its deep voice had not been heard in nearly 2 seasons. 2 rivers intercepted Siiya before she could reach her family dwelling. "Your grandmother searches for you," the elder woman said, her sharp eyes noting Siiya's disheveled appearance and the unfamiliar amulet partially visible at her neck. "The blessing ceremony cannot proceed without her apprentice." "I found rare night-blooming sage," Siiya explained, a practiced lie coming easier now, though it sat no more comfortably in her spirit. The journey took longer than expected. 2. River's expression remained skeptical, but the preparation activities demanded her attention elsewhere. "Go to your grandmother. She waits in the medicine lodge." Siiya moved through the village with forced casualness, acutely aware of carrying secrets that could alter everyone's fate. Gelota's amulet felt warm against her skin, a constant reminder of promises made and dangers shared. She tucked it more securely beneath her garment, knowing discovery would raise questions she couldn't answer. Her grandmother, Nijoni, sat grinding herbs when Siiya entered the medicine lodge. Unlike 2 rivers, she didn't immediately question her granddaughter's absence. Instead, she continued her methodical work, speaking without looking up. "The spirits take us where we need to be, not always where others expect us to go." The simple statement contained volumes of acknowledgement, acceptance, perhaps even understanding. Siiya felt tears threaten unexpectedly. Her grandmother's wisdom had always been her sanctuary, but now she carried knowledge too dangerous to share, even with her most trusted mentor. "The war party leaves at first light," Nijoni continued, finally meeting Siiya's eyes. "Your father leads them to the eastern boundary, where Apache hunters have been sighted." "How many warriors?" Siiya asked, keeping her tone neutral as she joined the herb preparation. 17, more than we have sent in many seasons." Her grandmother's hands stilled. "Something shifts beyond our understanding. Your father senses it, though he cannot name it." Siiya's pulse quickened. Perhaps her father already harbored doubts about the escalating conflict, making him potentially receptive to the evidence she carried. Or perhaps his uncertainty would make him more dangerous, more determined to protect their people from perceived threats. I heard the council speak of strange markings found near our hunting grounds, Siiya ventured carefully. Signs that seemed Apache but placed too obviously, as if meant to be found. Nijoni's gaze sharpened. You hear much for one who gathers plants at the forest's edge. The gentle challenge hung between them. Siiya chose her next words with care, balancing truth and necessary secrecy. I believe there may be others manipulating both Apache and Dine, grandmother, creating conflict that serves neither people. Bold thoughts from a healer's apprentice, Nijoni observed, though without rebuke. Have your plant journeys shown you evidence of such manipulation? The question offered an opening, but Siiya hesitated. Her grandmother's wisdom was legendary, her influence in the council significant. Yet sharing too much too soon risked exposing Galota before they could coordinate their approach, before she could decide how to respond. Drum beats shattered the moment, the war drum's voice rising above the village, sounds in slow, purposeful rhythm, the call to gathering, to unity before conflict. All would be expected to attend. We must join the others, Nijoni said, setting aside her work. Your father will speak to the people before tomorrow's departure. As they walked toward the gathering, Siiya noticed a scout running into the village from the eastern paths. Expression urgent, his gestures animated as he spoke with the warriors nearest the boundary. Something had happened, something that altered existing plans. Her father emerged from the council lodge, his face grave as he received the scout's report. The drum beats intensified, their tempo increasing slightly, no longer just calling the community together, but communicating something more immediate. What has happened? Siiya asked a woman standing nearby. Apache warriors have been spotted closer than expected, came the tense reply. They move in greater numbers toward our hunting grounds. The council believes they prepare for a major attack. The drum beats resonated through Siiya's chest, each impact a reminder of time slipping away, of violence approaching with every passing moment. Somewhere beyond the village boundaries, Alota worked to reach his people with their shared truth. But the drum's accelerating voice suggested their carefully constructed plan might already be overtaken by events beyond their control. The village gathering confirmed Siiya's fears. Her father's address to the community left no doubt that conflict was not just expected, but welcomed a chance to finally answer Apache aggression with definitive action. The council had unanimously approved an expanded mission, not merely to defend boundaries, but to strike decisively against Apache encampments. Watching her father speak, his face hardened with righteous certainty, Siiya felt the fragile plan she shared with Galota unraveling. Morning would bring not just 17 warriors to the boundary, but nearly 30, with supplies for an extended campaign rather than a single day's defense. After the gathering dispersed, she returned to the medicine lodge with her grandmother to prepare healing bundles for the war party. Each warrior would carry 1 small pouches containing herbs for pain, infection, and bleeding. The work was solemn, each bundle a tacit acknowledgement that blood would flow, that some might not return. Your thoughts are far from here, Nijoni observed as they worked by lamplight. Since your return, your spirit walks 2 paths. The gentle accusation held no judgment, but Siiya felt exposed nonetheless. Her grandmother's perception had always been unervingly accurate. Before she could formulate a safe response, Nijoni rose and moved to the back of the lodge where personal belongings were stored. There is something you should see, the elder woman said, removing a small bundle wrapped in aged deerskin from beneath her sleeping mat. Something I have kept hidden many seasons. She returned to the fire and carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside lay a pipe, unlike any Siiya had seen used in their ceremonies. Carved from red stone, its bowl depicted intertwined animal figures, wolf and a bear, traditional spirit guides of Apache and Dine respectively. The stem, made of polished cedar, or intricate symbols from both traditions, woven into a single flowing design. A peace pipe, Siiya breathed, recognizing its significance. From the ancient stories. The last of its kind, Ijani confirmed. 7 generations ago, when our people's councils met together, such pipes were smoked to begin each gathering. This one belonged to my great-grandmother's father, who was among the last to attend such councils before the Great Division. Siiya stared at the artifact, its existence confirming everything the cave paintings had shown. You kept this hidden all these years? The time was not right for remembering, her grandmother replied simply. Our people chose to remember only the wounds inflicted after the division, not the harmony that existed before. With trembling fingers, Siiya reached for the pipe, connecting physically with history she had only glimpsed in cave paintings hours earlier. The stories you told me as a child of a time when Dine and Apache lived as allies, they were true, not just legends. All legends begin in truth, child. Nijoni studied her granddaughter with eyes that missed nothing. Just as your absence. These past days holds truth you've not yet shared. The moment had arrived sooner than Siiya had planned. Looking into her grandmother's weathered face wisdom, earned through decades of serving their people, she made her decision. Taking a deep breath, she withdrew the poisoned arrowhead from her pouch and placed it beside the peace pipe. This was removed from the shoulder of an Apache hunter, she began, watching her grandmother's expression closely. But it was not fired by Dine hands. Over the next moments, Siiya related the essential truth-finding Gailota wounded, discovering evidence of Crow faction manipulation, the ancient cave paintings showing their people's shared history. She spoke carefully, emphasizing the threat to both tribes, while omitting details that might compromise Galota's safety or reveal the depth of connection growing between them. Rather than shock or disapproval, Nijoni's face showed something closer to validation, as if long-held suspicions were finally confirmed. I have questioned the convenient timing of these escalations, the elder healer said when Siiya finished. Attacks that leave clear signs yet no witnesses. Evidence too easily found. Hope kindled in Siiya's chest. Then you believe me? I believe. Something works against both our people's true interests, Nijoni replied carefully. Whether your Apache hunter's account is trustworthy remains to be proven. We have more evidence, Siiya pressed. The cave, the tokens left by Black Feather Band, patterns of deception spanning seasons. But bringing this before the council requires time we no longer have. Nijoni's fingers traced the peace pipe's carvings thoughtfully. Your father leads the war party, but he answers to the council. If enough elders raised concerns, he would be bound to investigate before engaging in full conflict. Can you help influence them? Siiya asked directly. Her grandmother's eyes met hers with surprising intensity. The question is not whether I can help you, but what you truly seek, granddaughter. Your concern seems deeper than preventing one. Day's battle. The observation struck unnervingly close to truth Siiya herself was only beginning to acknowledge, that her investment in peace had become entangled with feelings for Galota that defied simple categorization. I seek what this pipe represents, she answered finally. A return to wisdom our peoples have forgotten. Nijoni nodded slowly, decision forming in her expression. Then we have work to do before dawn, and little time for it. The council must be approached carefully, with evidence they cannot dismiss. While her grandmother worked to discreetly approach key council elders, Siiya slipped away from the village under cover of pre-dawn darkness. The war preparations provided unexpected advantage, with so many focused on the coming conflict. 1. Healer's apprentice attracted little notice. She carried the peace pipe, wrapped securely in her pack alongside her medicine pouch. Whether it would serve its intended purpose remained uncertain, but its presence gave her courage. Generations before, it had facilitated understanding between divided peoples. Perhaps it could do so again. Her destination was the split rock near. The Silver Creek, a designated message location where Galota might have left word of his progress. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when she reached the site, casting long shadows across the landscape. No feather awaited her at the agreed location. Either Galota had not yet reached his people, or he had been unable to leave a message. Neither possibility eased her growing concern out as she prepared to continue toward the cave there. Fallback meeting place voices carried from nearby. Instinctively, Siiya pressed herself against the rock face, becoming one with the shadows. Two men emerged from the brush less than 30 paces away. Their garments and weapons marked them clearly as neither Dying nor Apache, but members of the Crow faction. Black Feather Scouts, based on the distinctive markings adorning their gear. They moved with purpose, checking the surrounding area with practiced efficiency. The Apache war chief brings more warriors than expected, one said in heavily accented trade language. Macpia will want to adjust the plan. The false evidence is already placed, his companion replied. When they encounter Dying warriors at Broken Tree Ridge, neither side will question why the other attacks. The first scout chuckled darkly. And while they destroy each other, we claim the northern hunting grounds uncontested. Their casual discussion of engineered bloodshed chilled Siiya's blood. This was no mere border skirmish they were manipulating, but a carefully orchestrated massacre, one that would leave both tribes devastated, creating opportunity for Black Feather Band to seize contested territories. The scouts moved toward the creek, continuing their conversation just beyond Siiya's hearing. She remained motionless, mind racing. Here was the definitive evidence they had sought: direct confirmation of Black Feather's manipulation and their ultimate objective. But witnessing it alone served little purpose. She needed to document it, to bring proof back to both her grandmother and Galota. One of the scouts knelt by the water's edge, removing a leather satchel from his shoulder. From her position, Siiya could see him withdrawing what appeared to be maps or drawings. The second scout pointed to different locations, their discussion becoming animated. The intelligence they were reviewing might provide exactly the evidence. Needed locations of planted false signs, perhaps details of the planned ambush. Without it, her claims remained just that, claims from the daughter of a war leader with inexplicable sympathy for the enemy. Decision crystallized. She would need to obtain whatever documents they carried, which meant confronting armed scouts alone. Not an even match for a healer, even one with basic defensive training. She needed advantage, or at least distraction. Her medicine pouch contained possibilities. Carefully, she extracted dried ginseng weed, a powerful plant her grandmother used only in the most controlled circumstances for severe pain or to induce necessary visions. In concentrated form, when errand, its smoke caused disorientation and temporary blindness. Working silently, she prepared a small bundle with the dried plant wrapped in birch bark, adding pine resin to ensure it would ignite quickly. From her tinderbox, she struck a spark, waiting until the bundle smoldered properly before giving it full flame. The scouts remained focused on their documents, unaware of her presence or preparation. When the flame caught properly, Siiya tossed the bundle directly into their midst and covered her own mouth and nose with a damp cloth from her pouch. Thick, acrid smoke billowed immediately, enveloping the surprised scouts. Their shouts of confusion confirmed the medicine's swift effect, stumbling, disoriented movements as the powerful plant attacked their senses. Siiya moved quickly, keeping low beneath the worst of the smoke. The scout's satchel lay abandoned. As they staggered away from the source of their distress, cursing and coughing violently, she seized the leather bag and retreated rapidly, putting distance between herself and the affected men before they could recover. Only when she had reached the safety of dense forest did she pause to examine what she had captured. The satchel contained exactly what she had hoped: a deerskin map marked with both Dying and Apache positions, locations of planted false evidence, and most damning of all, a distinctive ceremonial mask fragment wrapped in oiled cloth. The mask decorated with 3 black feathers and marked with the same symbol found on the poisoned arrowhead was clearly meant to be discovered at the conflict site, completing the deception. With trembling hands, Siiya secured these precious items in her own pack alongside the peace pipe. Now she possessed what both her grandmother and Gylota needed: irrefutable evidence of the third tribe's manipulation. The challenge remained delivering it in time to prevent the coming bloodshed. A sudden thought stopped her. The scouts would report the theft. Black Feather Band would realize their plot was exposed. Would they abandon their plan or accelerate it? The ancient meeting circle stood atop a mesa overlooking valleys claimed by both tribes, neutral ground by oldest tradition, though unused for generations. Stone seats arranged in concentric rings faced a central fire pit where, legends held, the smoke of council fires once carried the united voice of Apache and Dying to the Creator. Now, as midday sun beat down on the weathered stones, tension filled the sacred space. On the western approach stood Dying Representative Siiya's father Hastian at their center, flanked by 4 council elders, including Nijoni. Their expressions reflected varying degrees of skepticism and caution. From the eastern path came the Apache delegation 5 warriors, led by a commanding figure whose ceremonial garments and bearing marked him unmistakably as their chief. The distinctive necklace at his throat confirmed what Siiya already knew. This was Gylota's father, Nantawan, legendary for both wisdom and fierce protection of Apache interests. Between these approaching groups, at the circle's heart, stood Siiya and Gylota, their presence together, a physical embodiment of the unlikely alliance they proposed. They had met at dawn at the hidden cave, sharing their respective progress in planning this desperate gambit. Nijoni had accomplished what seemed impossible, convincing enough council members to delay the war party's departure for this unprecedented meeting. Gylota, upon reaching his people, had found unexpected support from his father's most trusted advisor, who harbored similar suspicions about the convenience of recent Dying provocations. Now everything depended on the next moment's weather. Generations of distrust could be temporarily set aside, long enough to consider evidence of a common enemy. As the delegations reached the circle's edge, shock registered on every face at the sight of Siiya and Gylota standing together. Hastian's hand moved instinctively to his knife, while murmurs rippled through the Apache warriors. "What is the meaning of this?" Hastian demanded, his voice sharp with betrayal as he stared at his daughter. "Father, respected elders," Siiya began, her voice steadier than she felt, "we have discovered evidence of deception that threatens both our peoples. You stand with Apache and speak of threats to Dying?" One elder's incredulous question carried both accusation and disbelief. From the Apache side, Nanton studied his son with unreadable eyes. "My son was reported missing, presumed dead after ambush. Now he appears with Dying Healer and speaks of common cause." "Honored father," Gylota addressed the chief with formal respect, "I was wounded by enemies who profit from conflict between our peoples. This healer saved my life and helped uncover a plot against both tribes." Siiya's father advanced one step, rage and confusion warring in his expression. "What spell has been cast on you, daughter, to trust the words of our enemies?" "Not words. Alone," Siiya replied, reaching carefully into her pack to withdraw the first piece of evidence, the poisoned arrowhead. "This arrow struck Gylota near our boundaries. It bears the mark of neither Dying nor Apache craftsman." She passed it first to Nijoni, who confirmed with a nod before offering it to the other elders for examination. "A single arrow proves little," Hastian countered, though he studied the unfamiliar marking with evident interest. "Then perhaps this will prove more," Gylota said, producing the tokens recovered from the abandoned camp false, insignia designed to implicate both tribes in attacks they hadn't committed. While the leaders examined these items, Siiya continued, their explanation describing the Crow faction's systematic manipulation, the economic motivation behind fostering conflict, the planned ambush where both sides would believe themselves attacked by the other. Skepticism remained palpable until she produced the map in ceremonial mask fragment from the scout's satchel. The map clearly showed both tribes' positions marked, with annotations in Crow language detailing the deception strategy. These were taken from Black Feather Scouts yesterday, she explained. They discussed openly how they have engineered this conflict to claim northern hunting grounds while our peoples destroy each other. This evidence caused visible shifts in the leaders' stances. Apache warriors conferred in low voices, while Dine elders examined the map with growing concern. "If what you claim is true," Nanton said finally, addressing both Siiya and his son, "why would you risk bringing this before us? Both your lives were forfeit the moment you chose to trust the traditional enemy." It was Gailota who answered, his voice carrying conviction that commanded attention from both delegations. "Because we discovered something that changes how we must see each other." He described the hidden cave with its ancient paintings, the visual proof that their peoples had once lived in cooperation rather than conflict. As skepticism threatened to resurface, Siiya removed the final piece of evidence from her pack, the peace pipe her grandmother had preserved. Its unmistakable craftsmanship, incorporating sacred symbols from both traditions, silenced objections more effectively than any words could have. "This pipe," Nijoni said, stepping forward to address all present, "was smoked in council circles, like this one, when wisdom guided our peoples rather than fear and hatred." A moment of profound silence followed as the pipe was passed reverently among both delegations, each leader recognizing elements of their own sacred traditions, woven seamlessly with those of their supposed enemies. "We have been blind, one Apache," Elder said finally, "fighting shadows while real enemies move against us both." The council fire burned through the day and into evening as long-standing grievances were aired, evidence examined, and truths confronted. What began as tense accusation gradually transformed into cautious dialogue and active cooperation, as leaders from both tribes recognized the extent of their manipulation. By nightfall, a plan had formed. Rather than retreating to separate territories, the warriors of both peoples would combine forces to confront the Black Feather Band, not with immediate violence, but with united strength that would demonstrate their deception had failed. Boundaries would be jointly patrolled, information shared, economic cooperation considered, under starlight, with the ancient circle as witness. Nantan and Hastian performed a ceremony unseen for 7 generations, smoking the peace pipe together while reciting pledges from their shared past. The smoke rose straight and true to the heavens, carrying promise of renewed understanding. Through it all, Siiya and Gailota stood as living embodiments of this unexpected alliance, their story of meeting, healing, and discovery retold for both delegations. What began as enemy aiding enemy had blossomed into something neither tribe could easily categorize. Yet none could deny its power. As the gathering prepared to disperse until a larger council could be arranged, Nanton approached Siiya with formal dignity. Behind him, several Apache women carried a bundle wrapped in ceremonial cloth. "Daughter of Hastian," the Apache chief addressed her, using the formal structure of important pronouncements. "My son lives because your hands brought healing rather than harm. Our peoples may live in peace because your heart recognized truth when others saw only enemies." He gestured, and the women came forward, unfolding the bundle to reveal a magnificent blanket woven with symbols of both tribes, a creation clearly begun long ago, but completed recently. Its patterns speaking of shared history and intertwined destiny. "This union blanket was started 7 generations past," Nanton explained, "when a daughter of Apache and son of Dine sought to marry despite growing tensions. It remained unfinished when conflict separated our peoples. Our oldest weaver has completed it now, a symbol of what may again be possible." The significance of such a gift was lost on no one present. A union blanket served one ceremonial purpose: to wrap a couple whose joining represented important alliance between families or clans. By offering it to Siiya in Gailota's presence, Nantan was acknowledging what had developed between them, while elevating it to symbolic importance for both tribes. Hastian stepped forward, his expression complex a father's protective concern, warring with a leader's recognition of necessary change. "My daughter acted without permission, against our traditions," he began, then paused, visibly reconsidering his words. "And in doing so, may have saved many lives, including my own. Perhaps the old ways are not always the wisest ways." He turned to Siiya, studying her face as if seeing her truly for the first time. "Your grandmother tells me she has long recognized the healing gift in you, not just for bodies, but for deeper wounds." I begin to understand her meaning. The public acknowledgement from both fathers created space for what had remained unspoken. Between Siiya and Gailota, standing together before their peoples, they faced each other with newfound freedom to express what had grown between them. I followed a blood trail and found not just a wounded man, but a future I could not have imagined. Siiya said, her voice clear enough for all to hear. "I received healing from my body," Gailota replied, "and in return wished to offer the only worthy gift my heart and soul in service to our shared vision." Nantan and Hastian jointly presented the union blanket, wrapping it around both Siiya and Gailota in the traditional manner. The assembled witnesses from both tribes recognized the significance, not merely blessing an unexpected union, but symbolically reuniting peoples long divided. Not all faces showed approval. Several warriors from both sides maintained skeptical expressions, generations of distrust not easily overcome by a single day's revelations. Two rivers openly frowned, muttering about hasty decisions and abandoned traditions. The path forward would not be without obstacles. Yet as night deepened and stars brilliantly traced the patterns Siiya and Gailota had discussed beside the Silver Creek, something profound had shifted. The union blanket around their shoulders represented not just their personal connection, but a fragile new beginning for their peoples, one that honored ancient alliance rather than recent enmity. Under the witness of the star beings that recognized no tribal boundaries, they stood wrapped in living history, the blanket's intricate patterns, telling a story of separation healed through understanding, of division mended through compassion, of future possibilities born from reconnection with shared past. One full cycle of seasons had passed since the day Siiya followed a blood trail to the Silver Creek. The aspen leaves had turned gold once more, painting the foothills with autumn's brush, while crisp morning air carried the promise of coming winter. The dying village had transformed in subtle yet profound ways. Near its eastern edge now stood several Apache dwellings families who had chosen to live closer to their new allies for purposes of trade, shared hunting, and mutual protection. Similarly, a small Dine settlement had formed at the edge of Apache territory, creating twin bridges between once divided peoples. Siiya moved carefully among her expanded garden of healing plants, her movements deliberate to accommodate her heavily pregnant form. The child within her, active and strong by all signs, would arrive with the first snows, according to her grandmother's prediction. "You should rest," came Gailota's voice as he approached from their dwelling, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft hide. "The child rests enough for both of us," she replied with a smile, accepting his supportive arm nonetheless. "What have you there?" Instead of answering directly, he guided her to the bench she had crafted outside their home, a dwelling that incorporated elements of both Apache and Dine traditions, much like their shared life. "It is finished," he said simply, unwrapping the bundle to reveal an intricately carved cradle. The craftsmanship took Siiya's breath away. Beginning with a solid piece of cedar, Gailota had spent months transforming it into a functional work of art. The rockers curved gracefully, ensuring gentle movement. The sides displayed detailed scenes from the story that had brought them together, a blood trail leading to the Silver Creek, the hidden cave with its ancient paintings, the meeting circle where peace had been renewed. Most striking was the headboard, which depicted an Apache warrior and dying healer standing together beneath a blanket of stars, their hands joined as they faced forward. Behind them, faintly carved as if emerging from mist, stood figures representing 7 generations past, the ancestors from the time before division. "It's beautiful," Siiya whispered, fingers tracing the detailed work. "You began this the day we met?" "With a small piece of juniper," he confirmed, "though I didn't know then what it would become." Like the cradle, their alliance had started small, one act of compassion, one decision to trust before growing into something neither could have envisioned. The fragile peace established that day at the meeting circle had weathered initial skepticism, strengthened through cooperation against common challenges, and gradually transformed into genuine respect between their peoples. The confrontation with Black Feather Band had ended not in bloodshed, but in retreat, Crow faction abandoning their territorial ambitions when faced with united Apache and Dine forces. Trade routes now operated freely through shared protection. Hunting grounds were cooperatively managed, and ancient knowledge was being carefully exchanged between tribal elders. Not all had embraced the new alliance. Some families from both tribes had chosen to move farther from the borders, maintaining traditional separation. Occasional tensions flared when old grievances resurfaced or cultural differences led to misunderstanding. The path of unity required constant attention, like any relationship of value. "My father sends word from the Eastern Council," Galota said, settling beside her. "2 more tribes have expressed interest in our peace accord. They see the prosperity that cooperation has brought." Siiya nodded, unsurprised. Their story had traveled beyond tribal boundaries, carried by traders and visitors who witnessed the unexpected alliance. What began as necessary cooperation against manipulation had revealed broader possibilities, strength through connection rather than isolation. "And your father?" she asked. "Has his view softened?" "He joins the next council meeting," Galota replied, satisfaction evident in his voice. "He said the future his grandchild will inherit deserves his full support, whatever form it takes." Hastian's journey from skepticism to cautious acceptance had been gradual but meaningful. Though he maintained certain traditional boundaries, his willingness to participate in joint councils represented significant evolution. As evening approached, families from both tribes gathered for a shared meal in the central area between their dwellings. Children played together without concern for ancestral divisions, their ease with one another representing the most profound hope for lasting change. Seated with Nijoni near the communal fire, Siiya watched Galota demonstrate hunting techniques to young boys from both tribes. His patience and natural teaching ability had made him a favorite among the children, who saw in him not an Apache warrior, but simply a respected elder with valuable knowledge to share. "The child will be born into a different world than the one we knew," Nijoni observed, following her granddaughter's gaze. "A world with memory restored," Siiya agreed, hands resting on her rounded belly where new life belonging fully to both peoples, yet constrained by neither, prepared to enter a community, being reborn through remembrance of ancient connections. As twilight settled over the valley, the first stars appeared, the same stars that had witnessed countless generations of both separation and unity, the constant observers of humanity's capacity for both conflict and reconciliation.